Well, the title of this video is Possession, so I'm not actually going to be talking about like possessed entities in beds where their like head spins around and they expel green goo into a priest's face. Actually, talking about that superficially. Here's something simple, and you won't see this anywhere else. And if you could say it really simply, such that even a child could understand it, you take two desperate topics, something that someone would superficially think is completely unrelated, and unify them such that someone could understand it, then that's wonderful. So what's the distinction between people like the Lord of the Rings? Remember, they're constantly rubbing the ring, my precious. They're completely addicted to this shiny object, which is imbued with powers, and they can't like throw it back into the fires. By the way, that's from the Kalevala. J.R.R. Tolkien and the Lord of the Rings, with the idea of throwing the beautiful ring back into the fire. There's an ancient passage which is belonged to the Scythians. The Scythians actually came down. If I say anything, you're going to dispute it. We could say it came down from Scandinavia. It's this ancient principle of throwing the create back into the fires of the uncreate. And that, of course, is the principle behind throwing the ring back. That's a possession, and of course we actually get possessed by our possession. What's the distinction between being literally possessed by another entity and being woefully addicted to your possessions? Because, this becomes a talisman. Not this, literally, which is just a rock. Say, it's something that you covet, incredibly valuable, your most precious item or items. Well, this, of course, is a talisman, not literally this rock, but your favorite possession that causes you harm, and I want to talk about that in just a second. The distinction is that's an object, and it's a talisman. And in the case of someone being possessed, you are literally the talisman that becomes possessed. They're both talismans and they're points of focus. Objective possession, which causes harm, and subjective possession, both are talismans. One is a metaphysical talisman, and the other one is an objective talisman that is focused upon metaphysically as regarding the spirit and things that people actually attach to, which causes harm. This is actually called in ancient Pali Talmas, incorrectly translated as thirst, but it means heap. Kanda and Tanna kind of sound like the same words. Kanda means heap. It is a heap of objective possessions. This is kind of funny, but it's not funny at all. It's actually incredibly woeful. It's one of the natures of primordial agnosis, that people get possessed by their possessions. And if you think about it, something that somebody really, really wants to own, say it's too expensive and they save up for it, they have this, they have this suffering because they think that this is going to somehow make their life fulfilled by owning ABC, XYZ, and they save up for it, and they sacrifice their life and the time that belongs to the window of their life to have this thing, and they desire and want it so badly. But once they have it, the desire actually doesn't diminish, which is not actually ironic. It's hyperlogical, but as true metaphysics is both extremely simplex, but also too very rational and hyperlogical. They're still in desire of that which they now possess, because they don't want to lose it, they don't want it stolen, they must maintain it, they must protect it, they take care of it. So now they're actually sacrificing nearly as much time taking care of it and worrying about it, and still in desire of that which they now possess. Talisman, of course, is a focus of spirit. But a person can be, a living entity can be a talisman. And it is the case that these disembodied beings, and I never want to use the word, there's a lot of really, really awful loaded words which are completely meaningless almost. Meditation is a meaningless, loaded, silly, nonsense word. So is the word ghost. I mean, it's just a nonsense word. When you say ghost, somebody has some sort of crazy idea about some sort of, ghost movie that they saw. So it's a loaded word. Same is true of the word meditation. That's the reason why I never use that word. Many reasons why. Every time I made a video on this horrible word, I get a lot of angst or hate. But I mean, I'm hyperlogical in discussing that word. It's not specific. You can't specify what that means. But when you say ghost, somebody, thinks of all sorts of ghost movies. So, well, what about the signal in relationship to the radio? It's like, what do you mean? Well, you don't believe in ghosts, but beliefs, of course, are the playthings of fools. And we're not interested in beliefs. I don't care what I believe in, much less what you believe in. I'm just talking about it as logical and rational because true monistic metaphysics via Greek, Indian, Egyptian, and some others, Neoplatonic, are hyper-rational, hyper-logical. It's like, why do you have smashed the radio? Did I do anything to the signal? Well, of course not. Well, why do you think a disembodied being doesn't exist? The existential, psychophysical, i.e. persona non grata, Bob and Sue, has nothing to do with the animating spirit or spiritus sanctum or nous or soul that's animating it, no different than the signal, which of course is not on the radio. Smashing the radio, i.e. the radio dying, has nothing to do with the signal. So obviously disembodied beings do exist. That's so far as that loaded term, which is nearly as bad as the word meditation. It's just a nonsense word that's just got an enormous amount of poo piled upon it because of so much, movies and garbage and folklore and just all sorts of silliness surrounding it that everybody actually is exposed to growing up. That a person becomes a talisman. This is how possession works, and that, of course, you're opening up a portal. You are allowing yourself to be a talisman for something, which, of course, is really a really horrible idea. I mean, this is a reason why nobody should ever mess with Ouija boards. It's very, very bad. By the way, the movie Exorcist is based upon, I think it's a slightly autistic boy, not a girl. But it's based in a house in St. Louis, Missouri, not up in New York, where it was. The Exorcist movie is based upon, I forget what's her name, the movie adaptation, and it's set somewhere up in New York. But the real Exorcist was a slightly autistic kid that did an enormous amount of playing with Ouija boards, and that's in St. Louis, Missouri. So he actually became a talisman, a point of focus for a disembodied being. And people say, well, aren't there any good ones out there? It's like, well, yeah, there are, but, there might be a good person or an innocent person on death row, but you can't go looking for good people on death row. I mean, these people are liars and scoundrels, and they will do or say anything to prey upon you. I mean, that's part of the reason why they're there. I mean, they embody the love of evil. Evil is not the doing of evil. I mean, stupid people and young children have done, quite evil things, but evil is not the doing of evil. We could argue that back or forth, but it's the love of evil that makes someone demonic and evil. So they become talismans for these desperate, and I don't mean desperate, disparate, excuse me, I said desperate instead of disparate beings, but it's no different than objective possession. The metaphysical focus goes from subjective to objective. And in the case of actual possession, it goes from disembodied subjective to ontological, existential subjective. Have you ever tuned to radio, like you've been between stations? There's a reason why stations that have a propagation circle that are X number of miles, there might be an identical frequency from a different radio station, but it's far enough away. But if you get ideal skip conditions, and you're tuned into a particular station, you'll actually get
chance of rain 20%.
You'll actually get both stations broadcasting on the same frequency at the same time. So you'll hear. I know many of you probably didn't grow up with radio, but it's actually quite common. You get to like a really high point, and you'll have two identical radio stations that are quite far from each other, but under ideal conditions, you'll actually get both, and this is where we actually have two sentient entities, shall we say, that are possessing one singular existential psychophysical being. I had the great misfortune that my rich buddy took me to a young guy, didn't drink or do drugs, very, very perfect health, young and spry. He had a sphere of cold around him that was, I was fat back then, before I got skinny, and then I got fat again. A sphere of cold around him that was so bone-numbingly hideous. I mean, it literally froze me right to the core. I mean, it's not his temperature was low in the house. There was a sphere around him. These disembodied beings actually create a cold cathode effect. Other people have postulated that these are oh, they're drawing energy from the environment. That's what's occurring. You could look up this phenomenon, type in on a Google or Bing search, type in a cold cathode. Anyway, they become existential talismans, and they were invited in, not willingly invited in. Once in a rare while, some extremely unintelligent person might do that and invite them in, but they actually create a link wherein which this disembodied being is allowed to take focus and embody another being. So you, psychophysical you, that is, becomes a talisman for another being. And that, of course, is great suffering and pain, and people suffer a lot, and they get sick, and all sorts of bad things happen to them. But the same bad thing, you can have a lot of possession. I have a lot of stuff in this house. None of it's worth anything except for some sewing machines. There's almost nothing of any value in this house. So you can say I have a lot of possessions in this house, most of which are not worth a single darn thing, but not be possessed by your possessions. But we all do that. We have burglar alarms and fire alarms. You're worried about losing them. And people suffer to this to a greater or lesser extent. We think about all these people that are super rich. We say, why are they so miserable? They're trying to keep up appearances regarding their face, which is another matter. You can't keep a sandcastle on the beach together forever. I mean, its nature is to wash away. But they end up becoming possessed by their possessions. There's somebody we were talking about, I don't want to give their name, that looks like an alien now. It's like a very beautiful person. Could have aged gracefully, because it's the nature, to get wrinkles and things to droop and sag and, to get old. There's so much, you look like a total alien now. In that case, the possession is the body, and they don't want it to undergo change or flux. But nobody talks about this. We desire to possess them, and once we have it, we're still in unending desire over the object because you don't want anybody to mess with it or touch it or use it. We don't want it to break. Some fancy laptop, it took me, months to save for it, and, I'm so worried about it now. I need to get insurance on it, anti-theft insurance. It's called an inland marine policy for thefts or drops or fires or water splash or whatnot. Oh, I'm worried about it. I need to get a sleeve for it. And like when you go on vacation, you don't want to leave in the hotel room because God knows who has the key to the hotel. And you're worried about your expensive laptop being stolen and all your personal data, which is another possession, on your laptops. You can't even enjoy your vacation. I've seen this before in many people. Like, oh, I can't leave the hotel. It's like, we're going to go to the beach. We came here to relax. Not that I've ever relaxed on a real vacation, at least not in 100 years. And they're still worried about it. Like, no, I want to stay in the hotel because my laptop's here and no one anybody to mess with it. And this particular hotel room doesn't have a safe. Some of the hotel rooms have a safe. You can, and those are usually rigged anyway. It's like, yeah, it's got a safe, but everybody knows the combination. And even though it's a safe and it's a real safe, they're an easy way for nefarious people to get into it, and that's how they actually, unfortunately, rob hotel guests. I don't know if you've heard about that or not. So people are still in suffering and desire once they have it. They're worried about it breaking it, maintaining it, protecting it, it getting stolen. And I just wanted to talk about, the nature of fundamental metaphysical suffering regarding possession. Subjective possession, a talisman thereof, and objective possession, a talisman thereof also. And this, of course, is a focus of suffering. Anytime, and it's no different than the possession that people see in them. Say I was never beautiful anyway, ever to begin with. Some of these people that are very beautiful, they're always so worried about the possession that they see in the mirror. And I got to maintain it. You can't get droopy or saggy, or, I need to get a facelift. It's theirs for the rest of their life, but they're still worried about it all the time. It's like, oh, I got to eat a certain way. If I put on 5 pounds, I won't be pretty anymore. Oh, woe is me. We look at these people that are rich and beautiful, and they're not all like that. I'm not saying they all are, but I mean, there's a significant number that are. I got to put on 5 pounds. I got to use special facial cream every day. I need to get my beauty rest. And I've never had that issue, of course. Can't polish a turd, right? But I wanted to talk about the metaphysics of possession, both objective and subjective, because both are possession. Whether you yourself or somebody else is possessed, or you yourself are possessing something that cannot be spiritually possessed, but it is still possessing you by means of focus. You focus on those objects and you're possessing them and you're worried about them, or you yourself become the object of focus, a talisman thereof, and therefore are unfortunately possessed. Thankfully, genuine possession is rather rare. It's not extremely rare, though. And people that play with fire will get burned. Was it old Chinese saying that says, rooster whose stick head and lawnmower end in stew? I don't believe in the curiosity killed the cat passage, but it's kind of like a curiosity saying. Some of these people believe that they can play with that and put it down like watching a scary movie, and you can't. It doesn't work that way. You turn the movie off, and you had a good time being scared, but you're playing with something that will play back with you, and not in a good way. Not in a good way. I hope I kept this video on possession rather simple. I wanted to make this video. I kept it kind of short and concise. At least I think I did. You tell me otherwise. But thanks so much for watching. Lux Veritas. It's really warm here. I'm going to try to go down to my farm tomorrow and like bebop in the woods, with my walking stick and drink chilled water and look at nature and stuff like that. It's supposed to be like 82 degrees tomorrow. I never get a chance to get away, so hopefully I can do that tomorrow. Have a lovely week. Thank you so much.